The transport ship was nothing like the elegant vessels that usually docked at Valdris Prime. Where most galactic ships curved and flowed like works of art, this one was all straight lines and practical angles. It looked like it had been built by engineers who cared more about function than beauty. Master Hyunwoo stood in the observation deck of the docking bay, watching as the human ship settled onto its landing platform. The landing itself was smooth enough, but there was something different about it. Most pilots approached the dock with flowing, graceful movements that showed their connection to their ship's energy systems. This pilot had simply pointed the ship where it needed to go and brought it down with efficient, no-nonsense precision. "So those are the humans," said So-jin, who had joined her master at the observation window. "Their ship is." "Interesting." Taemin nodded from beside her. "I have been reading about their species. They are quite young as civilizations go. They only discovered space travel 200 years ago, and they have only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. 50 years, Hyunwoo repeated thoughtfully. Some of our advanced students train longer than that just to master the basic forms. The ship's cargo bay opened with a mechanical hiss, and 5 figures emerged. Even from a distance, it was clear that these were the human representatives. They wore simple military uniforms in dark green, with minimal decoration or ornamentation. No flowing robes, no ceremonial armor, no visible signs of rank beyond small metal symbols on their collars. The leader appeared to be a man of medium height with short black hair and calm, observant eyes. He moved with confidence but without the fluid grace that marked a trained warrior. Behind him walked 4 others, 2 men and 2 women, all appearing to be in their 20s or 30s. They look so ordinary, So-jin murmured. Hyunwoo had to agree. In his years at the academy, he had seen warriors from dozens of species. Some were tall and imposing, others small, but radiating inner power. Some moved like dancers, others like coiled springs ready to explode into motion. But these humans looked like they could be shopkeepers or farmers. There was nothing about them that suggested they were capable fighters, let alone warriors worthy of the centennial trials. The welcoming party was led by Master Weltar, whose crystalline body caught and reflected the docking bay lights. He approached, the humans with the formal gestures prescribed by galactic protocol, his movements slow and ceremonial. The human leader, Captain Lee Dong-hyun, according to the information they had received, responded with a simple bow of his head and an extended hand. It was a gesture that meant nothing in galactic martial culture, but Master Weltar adapted and touched the human's hand with one of his crystal appendages. "Welcome to Valdris Prime," Master Weltar said in the common galactic language. "I am Master Weltar of the Combat Academy. We are honored to host Earth's representatives for the Centennial Trials." "Thank you," Captain Dong-hyun replied. His accent was unusual, but his words were clear. "I am Captain Lee Dong-hyun of the Earth Defense Forces. These are my teammates: Sergeant Park Ji-won, Corporal Kim Woo-jin, Engineer Choi Yu-na, and Specialist Han Min-seo." Each of the humans nodded as they were introduced. They stood at attention, with military precision, but there was none of the spiritual awareness that marked true warriors. They looked around the docking bay with frank curiosity, like tourists visiting a new place rather than fighters preparing for the greatest combat challenge in the galaxy. Master Weltar led them through the academy grounds, pointing out the various training facilities. The meditation gardens, where students learned to commune with the universal energy. The gravity chambers, where warriors practiced under conditions that would crush ordinary beings. The weapons halls, filled with implements of war from across the known worlds. The humans listened politely and asked practical questions. How long had the academy been operating? How many students trained here at one time? What were the safety protocols for the more dangerous training exercises? They showed no interest in the spiritual aspects of combat training. When Master Weltar explained the importance of energy cultivation, Captain Dong-hyun nodded politely but asked no follow-up questions. When they passed a group of advanced students practicing levitation techniques, the humans watched with mild interest but no sign of understanding what they were seeing. "Your people," Master Weltar asked as they toured the weapons hall, "what fighting disciplines do they practice? What traditions have they developed in their martial arts?" Captain Dong-hyun considered the question. We have many different fighting styles on Earth. Some focus on striking, others on grappling. Some use weapons, others rely on empty-hand techniques. But most of our military training is based on practical combat effectiveness rather than spiritual development. Practical combat, Master Weltar repeated as if the words didn't quite make sense to him. But surely you understand that true combat mastery comes from inner cultivation? From harmony with the universal forces? We focus on getting the job done, Sergeant Jiwon said simply. She was a compact woman with alert eyes and calloused hands. Whatever works best in the situation. The tour continued to the energy projection ranges, where students learned to manifest their inner power as weapons. A group of second-year students was practicing creating bolts of colored light that struck targets with perfect accuracy. Corporal Wu Jin watched this demonstration with obvious interest. How does that work exactly? He asked. Through years of meditation and energy cultivation, Master Weltar explained. The student learns to gather the life force from within their body and project it outward as a focused attack. It requires perfect mental discipline and spiritual balance. How long does it take to learn? Engineer Yuna asked. For basic proficiency? Perhaps 10 years. For true mastery? A lifetime of study. The humans exchanged glances. Specialist Min Seo, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. What happens if someone can't do the energy manipulation? Are there alternative approaches? Master Weltar looked puzzled. Alternative approaches? But this is the foundation of all advanced combat. Without energy cultivation, one cannot hope to face opponents who have mastered these techniques. I see, Captain Dong-hyun said neutrally. They were shown to their quarters in the Academy's guest wing. The rooms were simple but comfortable, designed for visiting masters and advanced students from other schools. As the tour group prepared to part ways, Master Weltar made a generous offer. Please feel free to use any of our training facilities during your stay. Perhaps your people would benefit from learning some of our basic meditation techniques before the trials begin. We have excellent instructors who could help you understand the fundamental principles of energy work. Captain Dong-hyun thanked him politely but declined. We appreciate the offer, but we have our own preparation methods. We wouldn't want to interfere with your students' training schedules. After Master Weltar left, the humans gathered in Captain Dong-hyun's quarters. From the observation deck, So-jin watched them through the windows. They had spread papers and electronic devices across the table and seemed to be having an intense discussion. What do you think they are planning? Taemin asked. I have no idea, Hyunwoo admitted. But look at how they work together. See how they share information, how each one contributes to the discussion. There is a kind of coordination there, but not the spiritual harmony we are taught to value. It is something else. Over the following days, the humans kept to themselves. They politely attended the formal meals and ceremonies, but they spent most of their time in private training sessions. Curious academy students sometimes tried to observe, but the humans had chosen to practice in areas where they could not be easily watched. What the students did see was confusing. The humans ran laps around the academy grounds, but not in the flowing, meditative style taught in the basic conditioning classes. They ran with heavy packs, pushing themselves to exhaustion and then recovering quickly. They practiced with what looked like primitive weapons, metal knives, chemical projectile weapons, and devices that seemed to be technological rather than energy-based. Most puzzling of all, they spent hours studying. Not ancient texts or meditation, manuals, but technical documents and what appeared to be detailed analyses of the trial challenges. They watched recordings of previous competitions, took notes, and held long discussions about strategy and tactics. They are approaching this like a problem to be solved, So-jin observed to her master. Not like a spiritual challenge to be overcome. Yes, Hyunwoo agreed. It is unusual. 3 days before the trials were to begin, Master Weltar approached the humans again. He had been discussing their presence with the other masters, and there was some concern about their lack of preparation in the traditional sense. Captain Dong-hyun, he said, forgive me if this seems presumptuous, but are your people truly ready for these trials? The challenges they will face have been designed to test warriors who have trained for decades in the advanced arts. I would hate to see anyone injured because they were not adequately prepared. Captain Dong-hyun smiled, the first time any of the Academy staff had seen him show much emotion. Thank you for your concern, Master Weltar. I understand your worry. The Great Colosseum of Valdris Prime had been built specifically for the Centennial Trials. It was a massive structure that could hold 50,000 spectators, with viewing areas designed for dozens of different alien species. Some sections had different atmospheric conditions, others had varying gravity fields, and still others were equipped with special sensory devices for beings who experience the world in ways beyond normal sight and sound. The opening ceremony was a spectacle that lasted for 3 hours. Representatives from each participating world demonstrated their traditional combat arts in elaborate exhibitions. The crowd watched in awe as warriors performed feats that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The crystal beings from Veltara created intricate light sculptures while moving through combat forms that had been perfected over millennia. Their movements were precise and geometric, each gesture calculated to channel their natural energy in the most efficient way possible. The Gravity Worlders from Kepler-7 showed why they were feared across the galaxy as close combat specialists. They moved with crushing force, their every step creating small tremors in the Colosseum floor. When they demonstrated their fighting techniques, the impact of their strikes could be felt in the spectator seats, hundreds of meters away. The Ice Worlders from Theta Centauri flowed like living water, their pale blue skin seeming to shimmer as they channeled their natural affinity for thermal manipulation. They created barriers of supercooled air and launched projectiles of ice that moved faster than bullets. Each demonstration was met with thunderous applause. These were the greatest warriors of their respective species, masters who had dedicated their entire lives to perfecting arts that had been developed over thousands of years. When it came time for the humans to demonstrate their abilities, the Colosseum fell into an expectant hush. Everyone was curious to see what Earth's representatives would show. The 5 humans walked onto the arena floor wearing their simple military uniforms. They carried no traditional weapons, displayed no obvious signs of energy cultivation, and moved without the fluid grace that marked trained warriors. They looked small and ordinary in the vast space of the Colosseum. Captain Dong-hyun spoke briefly to his team. Then they spread out in a standard military formation. What followed was unlike anything the audience had ever seen at a Centennial trial. The humans performed a series of drills that were clearly military in nature, but they were executed with crisp precision. They moved and responded to each other's signals with perfect coordination, flowing through scenarios that appeared to be tactical rather than artistic. They demonstrated marksmanship with their primitive kinetic weapons, showing accuracy that was impressive even if the weapons themselves seemed crude compared to energy-based armaments. Engineer Yuna briefly demonstrated some kind of technical skill, rapidly assembling and disassembling a complex device while her teammates provided security around her. Specialist Minseo showed medical procedures, treating simulated injuries with speed and efficiency. The entire demonstration lasted less than 10 minutes. When it ended, the Colosseum was quiet. The audience wasn't sure what they had just witnessed. It had been competent, certainly, but it bore no resemblance to the martial artistry they were accustomed to seeing. Master Hyunwoo, watching from the Academy's section, felt a mixture of confusion and concern. The humans had shown discipline and teamwork, but nothing that suggested they could compete with warriors who could manipulate energy and perform superhuman feats of strength and speed. After the opening ceremonies, the competition began in earnest. The first challenge was the individual combat trials, where each warrior would face a series of increasingly difficult automated opponents. The combat drones were programmed with fighting techniques from across the galaxy and were designed to test every aspect of a warrior's training. The first group of competitors included So-jin, representing the Academy's traditional Kethmori style. She entered the arena to enthusiastic cheers from her fellow students and masters. The first combat drone activated, a humanoid machine about her size armed with energy weapons and programmed with basic combat algorithms. So-jin closed her eyes, for a moment, centering herself and feeling for the energy patterns around her. She could sense the drone's electromagnetic signature, could almost predict how it would move, based on the flow of power through its systems. When the drone attacked, she was already countering her movements, flowing like water around its strikes. The drone was fast, but Sojin was faster. More importantly, she could anticipate its actions through her energy perception. She deflected its energy bolts with her bare hands, using techniques that channeled the incoming force harmlessly away from her body. When she counterattacked, her strikes found the drone's weak points with surgical precision. The first drone fell in less than 2 minutes. The second one was more challenging, with upgraded armor and more sophisticated fighting algorithms. But Sojin adapted her approach and defeated it as well. By the time she faced the fifth and final drone, she was moving like a force of nature, her entire being focused into a perfect expression of martial artistry. The crowd erupted in approval as she stood victorious over the 5 destroyed drones. This was what they expected from a centennial trial, a demonstration of skill so advanced that it bordered on the mystical. Taimin followed with an equally impressive performance. His family's generations of training showed in every movement. He fought with a flowing, adaptive style that seemed to change based on what each drone required. Against the speed-focused drone, he became a whirlwind of motion. Against the strength-focused drone, he became an immovable object that redirected force rather than opposing it directly. Other warriors from across the galaxy demonstrated their own specialties. The crystal being warrior created constructs of hardened light that served as both weapons and shields. The gravity worlder simply endured his opponent's attacks, while delivering crushing counterstrikes that demolished the drones through sheer force. The ice worlder turned the arena into a frozen battlefield where only she could move freely. Each performance was a masterpiece of combat artistry, refined through centuries of tradition and perfected through lifetimes of dedication. Then it was time for the first human competitor. Sergeant Park Ji-won walked onto the arena floor with the same matter-of-fact attitude she had shown since arriving on Valdris Prime. She wore her standard military gear and carried her kinetic weapons. She did not pause to meditate or center herself. She simply checked her equipment, looked around the arena to assess the terrain, and nodded to indicate her readiness. The first combat drone activated. What happened next would be discussed and analyzed for years afterward. Ji-won did not try to match the drone's speed or counter its energy weapons with mystical techniques. Instead, she did something that caught everyone completely off guard. She adapted her tactics in real time based on what she observed. The drone came at her with a standard attack pattern, a combination of energy bolts and close combat strikes that had been effective against traditional warriors. Ji-won studied its approach for exactly 3 seconds, then shifted to a position where the arena's terrain features gave her an advantage. She used a piece of debris as cover, forcing the drone to adjust its attack angle, then struck from an unexpected direction with her kinetic weapon. The drone's programming updated immediately as it was designed to do. But instead of relying on trained reflexes and mystical perception to counter this adaptation, Ji-won analyzed the change and shifted her tactics again. She was problem-solving in real time, treating the combat as a puzzle to be solved rather than an artistic expression to be performed. The audience watched in stunned silence as she systematically dismantled the first drone, not through superior physical ability or energy manipulation, but through pure tactical thinking. She found weaknesses in its programming, exploited gaps in its defenses, and used every aspect of her environment to gain advantages. When the second drone activated, it had learned from observing her defeat of the first one. Its programming incorporated counters to her previous tactics, but Ji-won simply analyzed the new parameters and developed entirely new approaches. She was not bound by traditional techniques or centuries of training. She was free to innovate in ways that the galaxy's warriors had never imagined. By the time she faced the fifth drone, something unprecedented was happening. The machine's advanced programming was struggling to keep up with her constant innovation. It had been designed to counter known fighting styles and established techniques, but Ji-won wasn't using any recognized system. She was making it up as she went along and doing it brilliantly. The final drone fell after a brief but intense battle, where Ji-won used tactics that no one had ever seen before. She had won not through superior strength or mystical abilities, but through superior thinking. The Colosseum was absolutely silent. Master Hyunwoo stared down at the arena, trying to process what he had just witnessed. In 800 years of Academy history, no one had ever approached combat the way Ji-won just had. She had ignored every principle of traditional fighting and had succeeded anyway. So Jin, sitting beside her master, was equally stunned. How did she do that? She whispered. The second day of trials brought the team challenges, where groups of warriors worked together to overcome complex scenarios that tested both individual skill and group coordination. These challenges had been designed by the galaxy's greatest tactical minds to push even the most advanced warriors to their limits. The first scenario was called the Siege of Korath Station. Teams had to infiltrate a heavily defended space station, disable its defenses, rescue hostages, and escape before reinforcements arrived. It was a challenge that required perfect timing, flawless communication, and mastery of multiple combat disciplines. The Crystal Being team approached it like a precision instrument. Each member had trained for decades to work in harmony with the others. They moved through the station with geometric precision, their actions coordinated through shared energy resonance. When they encountered defensive drones, they dealt with them using traditional techniques perfected over centuries of warfare. The Gravity Worlders took a more direct approach, using their natural strength to smash through barriers and overpower the station's defenses through sheer force. Their tactics were brutally effective, but they followed established patterns that had been proven successful in countless real battles. Each team that attempted the challenge showed impressive skill and coordination. They executed their missions with the kind of flawless precision that could only come from years of training together and centuries of refined tactical doctrine. Then the human team took their turn. Captain Dong-hyun gathered his 4 teammates at the edge of the simulation area. Instead of beginning immediately, they spent several minutes studying the station's layout on their portable devices, discussing approaches in quiet voices, and making what appeared to be rapid calculations. "They are wasting time," Master Weltar observed from the judge's platform. "The scenario has a strict time limit. They should have begun their approach already." But Master Hyunwoo was watching more carefully. The humans weren't wasting time. They were planning. And their planning was unlike anything he had seen before. Instead of relying on established tactical doctrine, they were analyzing the specific challenge in front of them and developing a customized approach. When they finally began, their approach was immediately different from every other team. Instead of infiltrating through the main docking bays or maintenance shafts, Engineer Yuna led them to what appeared to be a solid wall of the station's outer hull. "What are they doing?" Sojin asked from the Academy's viewing section. "There is no entrance there." Yuna pulled out a device that none of the galactic observers recognized, a compact cutting tool that used some form of chemical reaction rather than energy manipulation. In less than 2 minutes, she had cut a perfectly round hole through the station's hull, creating their own entrance exactly where they needed it. That is cheating," Taemin said uncertainly. "No," Master Hyunwoo replied, studying the rules display. "The regulations say they must infiltrate the station. They do not specify how." Inside the station, the human team continued to do things that no previous group had attempted. When they encountered a locked door that other teams had bypassed using energy manipulation or brute force, Corporal Woo Jin produced another unfamiliar device. Instead of trying to overpower the lock, he connected his device to the door's control system and simply convinced it to open by mimicking the proper authorization codes. "He is hacking the simulation," Master Weltar said with obvious disapproval. "That is not martial artistry." "But it is effective," Captain Dong-hyun replied through the communication system. "And it accomplishes the objective." The rescue portion of the challenge presented the humans with their greatest test yet. The hostages were guarded by advanced combat drones in a room that had been designed to be nearly impossible to assault directly. Previous teams had overcome this challenge through superior fighting skill, overwhelming the guards through martial prowess. The humans took a completely different approach. Instead of fighting the drones, Specialist Min Seo used her medical knowledge to analyze the room's life support systems. She identified a way to introduce a harmless but incapacitating gas into the chamber's air supply. The guards were neutralized without a single shot being fired, and the hostages were rescued safely. The entire infiltration, which had taken other teams between 40 and 60 minutes, was completed by the humans in 18 minutes. They had not only succeeded, they had done it faster and with less risk than any previous attempt. The judges were baffled. The humans had completed every objective, followed all the rules, and achieved a better result than teams with far superior traditional training. But they had done it using methods that bore no resemblance to established martial arts. The third challenge was even more telling. Called the Destroyer's Gambit, it pitted individual warriors against a massive war construct that had been programmed with the fighting techniques of legendary champions from across galactic history. It was considered the ultimate test of single combat skill. The war construct was a fearsome opponent, 3 meters tall, armed with multiple weapon systems, and programmed with combat algorithms derived from the greatest warriors of the past 1,000 years. It moved with inhuman speed and precision, and its armor could withstand attacks that would demolish buildings. Sojin faced it using the Academy's most advanced techniques. She fought beautifully, her movements flowing like poetry as she tried to find weaknesses in the construct's defenses. Her energy manipulation was flawless, her tactical awareness perfect. But the construct had been designed to counter exactly these kinds of traditional approaches. After a grueling 20-minute battle, she was forced to concede defeat. Tai Min lasted longer, using his family's most secret techniques, but even he could not overcome the construct's overwhelming advantages. One by one, the galaxy's greatest warriors faced the machine and were defeated. It was not a shameful thing. The challenge was designed to be nearly impossible, a test of how far a warrior could push themselves against insurmountable odds. Then Engineer Choi Yu-na stepped into the arena. She looked even smaller than usual, facing the massive war construct, her simple military uniform stark against its gleaming armor and weapon arrays. She carried her standard equipment and showed no signs of the spiritual preparation that other warriors used to center themselves for impossible challenges. The construct activated and immediately launched into its opening attack sequence, a devastating combination of energy weapons and physical strikes that had proven effective against every previous opponent. Yuna studied its approach for exactly 5 seconds, then did something that stunned everyone watching. She ran away. Not in panic, not in retreat, but in a calculated tactical withdrawal that took her to a specific position in the arena. From there, she pulled out her portable devices and began what appeared to be some kind of technical analysis of the construct itself. "What is she doing?" Master Weltar demanded. "This is single combat, not a research project." But Yuna wasn't running from the fight. She was studying her opponent. While the construct pursued her around the arena, she was scanning it with her devices, analyzing its construction, mapping its systems, and looking for weaknesses that had nothing to do with traditional combat vulnerabilities. After 3 minutes of this apparent cat-and-mouse game, she stopped running. She had found what she was looking for. The war construct had been designed to be nearly indestructible, but like all complex machines, it had certain engineering requirements. Yuna had identified a critical structural weakness, not a gap in its armor or a flaw in its programming, but a fundamental design limitation that was necessary for its mobility systems to function properly. She pulled out a small explosive device, not a weapon in the traditional sense, but a piece of engineering equipment designed for demolitions work. She placed it in exactly the right location with surgical precision, then activated it from a safe distance. The explosion was tiny, barely visible to the spectators, but it severed a single critical support beam deep inside the construct's chassis. The massive machine took 3 more steps, then collapsed in a heap of expensive scrap metal as its own weight destroyed its structural integrity. The arena fell completely silent. Yuna had not defeated the war construct through superior martial skill or mystical energy manipulation. She had beaten it by understanding how it worked and finding a way to make it stop working. The entire battle had lasted less than 6 minutes. Corporal Kim Woo-jin's approach was even more unconventional. When he faced his version of the challenge, a different but equally formidable war construct, he didn't even try to fight it directly. Instead, he used his technical skills to hack into its control systems and simply turned it off. "This is outrageous," Master Weltar protested to the other judges. "They are not engaging in honorable combat. They are cheating." "Are they breaking any rules?" asked Judge Kethmore, an ancient being whose species had founded the trials. Centuries ago, Master Weltar checked the regulations. "No, but then they are not cheating," Judge Kethmore said firmly. "They are being creative." The final individual challenge was reserved for Captain Donghyun himself. He would face the most advanced war construct of all, one that incorporated every lesson learned from watching the previous battles. The final ceremony of the Centennial Trials was unlike any that had come before it. For 800 years, the trials had ended with a celebration of traditional martial excellence, honoring warriors who had perfected ancient techniques and demonstrated mastery of established disciplines. This time, the galaxy faced something completely new. The humans had not just participated in the trials, they had dominated them. In every single category of competition, Earth's representatives had achieved results that exceeded those of warriors who had trained their entire lives in combat arts that were older than human civilization itself. Master Hyun-woo stood on the presentation platform, looking out at the thousands of spectators who filled the Great Colosseum. Many of them appeared confused, even troubled by what they had witnessed over the past week. The comfortable certainties of galactic martial culture had been challenged in ways no one had imagined possible. "Distinguished masters, honored warriors, beings of all worlds," Hyun-woo began, his voice carried throughout the Colosseum by advanced acoustic systems. "We gather today to recognize exceptional achievement in the martial arts. But this year's trials have shown us something unprecedented, that excellence can take forms we never expected." The human delegation sat in the place of honor normally reserved for the trial's champions. They looked as ordinary as they had when they first arrived, but now everyone in the Colosseum understood that their ordinariness was deceptive. These unremarkable-looking beings had accomplished something that the galaxy's greatest warriors could not. Captain Donghyun was called forward to receive the Grand Champion's Medal, an honor that had never before been awarded to anyone from a world that had joined the galactic community so recently. As he walked across the platform, the applause was respectful but uncertain. The audience was still trying to understand what they had witnessed. "Captain Donghyun," Master Hyun-woo said as he presented the medal, "your people have shown us new possibilities in the art of combat. Would you share with us the philosophy that guided your achievements?" Captain Donghyun accepted the medal with a simple bow, then turned to address the assembled crowd. His voice was calm and unpretentious, the same tone he had used throughout his stay at the academy. "Masters and warriors of the galaxy," he began, "we are honored to have participated in these trials. We have learned much from watching your incredible demonstrations of skill and dedication. The techniques we have seen here represent centuries of wisdom and achievement that deserve great respect." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, some human, but most representing species from across the known worlds. "But we have also learned that there may be room for different approaches to the same challenges. On Earth we have a saying, there are many paths up the mountain. We do not claim that our path is better than yours, only that it is different." Master Weltar, still struggling to accept what had happened during the trials, spoke from the judge's platform. "Captain, with respect, your methods seem to ignore the spiritual aspects of combat entirely. How do you explain your success without energy cultivation or connection to the universal forces?" Captain Donghyun considered the question carefully. "Master Weltar, perhaps we define spiritual connection differently. When my teammate engineer Yuna analyzed the war construct, she was connecting with the universal forces, the forces of physics, engineering, and logical problem-solving. When Sergeant Jiwon adapted her tactics in real time, she was channeling something spiritual, the human capacity for creativity under pressure." "That is not the same thing," Master Weltar protested. "No," Captain Donghyun agreed. "It is not the same thing. It is a different thing. And perhaps that is the point." So Jin, watching from the academy section, felt something shift in her understanding. She had been trained to think of combat as the perfection of established techniques, the mastery of ancient wisdom. But what if there was more than one kind of mastery? The ceremony continued with the presentation of individual awards. Sergeant Ji Won received recognition for her innovative tactical approaches. Engineer Yuna was honored for her problem-solving abilities. Corporal Wu Jin was acknowledged for his technical creativity. Specialist Min Seo received awards for her unconventional use of medical knowledge in combat situations. Each presentation sparked discussions throughout the Coliseum. Spectators who had come expecting to see familiar demonstrations of traditional skill were instead grappling with entirely new concepts. After the formal presentations, Master Hyunwoo found himself in conversation with Captain Dong Hyun and his team. They were joined by Sojin, Taemin, and several other advanced students who had been profoundly affected by what they had witnessed. "Captain," Hyunwoo said, "I must ask you something that has been troubling me. How long did your people actually prepare for these trials?" Captain Dong Hyun exchanged glances with his teammates. "We learned about the trials 6 months ago. Most of our specific preparation was done during the journey here, about 3 weeks of travel time." The academy students looked stunned. Taemin spoke first. 3 weeks? But some of the techniques we saw you use, how could you develop them so quickly?" "We didn't develop them," Sergeant Ji-won explained. "We adapted them. Each challenge was different, so we approached each one differently. We used basic principles, problem analysis, creative thinking, teamwork, adaptation, but we applied them in new ways based on what each situation required." "But without years of training," Sojin asked, "how did you know what would work?" "We didn't," Corporal Wu Jin admitted. "We made our best guess based on the information available, then adjusted when we learned more. Sometimes we were wrong and had to try something else." This admission shocked the academy students even more than the humans' victories had. The idea of entering combat without certainty, without the confidence that came from mastering proven techniques, was almost unthinkable to them. Specialist Min Seo, who had been quiet during most of the conversation, spoke up. "If I may ask, how do your warriors train? What does a typical training program involve?" Taemin described the academy's curriculum: decades of meditation, energy cultivation, forms practice, spiritual discipline, and gradual mastery of increasingly advanced techniques. The structured progression that took students from basics, awareness to ultimate mastery over the course of a lifetime. "That sounds incredibly valuable," Min Seo said sincerely. "The discipline and focus required must develop extraordinary mental strength. But what happens when your students encounter a situation that doesn't fit the techniques they've learned?" The question hung in the air. It was something that none of the academy's masters had ever really considered. Their training was so comprehensive, so time-tested, that they had assumed it covered all possible situations. "We adapt the traditional techniques to meet new challenges," Master Hyunwoo said finally. "But what if adaptation isn't enough?" "Engineer," Yuna asked gently, "what if the new challenge requires completely new approaches?" Over the following days, these conversations continued throughout the academy. The human delegation had been invited to stay for an extended period, and their presence was causing profound changes in how the academy's students thought about combat and training. Some of the more traditional masters were resistant to these changes. Master Weltar continued to argue that the humans' methods, while effective, lacked the spiritual depth and cultural significance of the established arts. But even he had to admit that their results spoke for themselves. Other masters were more open to new ideas. Master Zikren began incorporating problem-solving exercises into her electromagnetic manipulation classes. Master Hyunwoo started teaching courses on tactical adaptation that combined traditional techniques with human-style creative thinking. Most significantly, the students themselves were changing. Sojin began studying human military history, fascinated by warfare that valued flexibility over perfection. Taemin started practicing improvisation exercises, learning to break free from the rigid patterns his family had taught him. The changes weren't without controversy. Some alumni protested that the academy was abandoning its ancient traditions. Some younger students struggled with training methods that emphasized uncertainty and adaptation over the comfort of established techniques. But gradually, a new understanding emerged. The Academy's traditional methods weren't wrong. They produced warriors of incredible skill and spiritual development. But they weren't the only path to excellence, and they weren't necessarily the best preparation for every possible challenge. 6 months after the trials, the Academy announced a new program, the Adaptive Combat Initiative. Students could choose to supplement their traditional training with courses in creative problem-solving, tactical improvisation, and technological integration. The program was optional, but enrollment was overwhelming. Captain Dong Hyun and his team returned to Earth, but they left behind something more valuable than their victory medals. They had planted seeds of change that would grow and spread throughout the galaxy's martial culture. Master Hyun-woo, now in his 70s, found himself energized by these changes in ways he hadn't expected. He had spent decades perfecting and teaching techniques that were thousands of years old. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds of Valdris Prime. Master Hyun-woo stood at the edge of the great stone platform, watching his students prepare for their daily practice. The air was still and quiet, broken only by the soft sound of breathing and the gentle rustle of training robes. Hyun-woo had been teaching at the Galactic Combat Academy for over 40 years. His own master had taught him the ancient ways, just as his master's master had taught before him. The chain went back 800 years, an unbroken line of warriors who had perfected the art of Kethmori fighting. "Begin," Hyun-woo said in a quiet voice that carried across the platform. 200 students moved as one. They raised their hands slowly, breathing in through their noses. Their eyes closed, and they began to feel for the energy that flowed through all living things. This was the first step, the foundation that everything else was built on. Without this inner calm, without this connection to the universal force, no warrior could hope to master even the most basic techniques. So-jin was among them, her movements smooth and practiced. At 28 years old, she was the youngest person ever to reach third-tier mastery. Her family came from a distant world where the gravity was 3 times stronger than normal. This had made her bones dense and her muscles powerful, but what made her special was her mind. She could feel the energy patterns around her like others might feel the wind. Next to her stood Tai-min, whose great-grandfather had once been the Academy's most honored teacher. Tai-min had grown up hearing stories of legendary warriors who could catch laser beams in their bare hands and leap across entire valleys. He had been training since he could walk, and now at 35, he moved with the grace of someone who had never known any other way of life. The students began the first form, their bodies flowing like water. Each movement was precise, designed to channel energy from the core of their being outward through their limbs. A casual observer might think they were dancing, but every gesture had meaning. Every turn and step was part of a system that had been tested in countless battles across the centuries. Hyun-woo watched with the eye of someone who had seen this routine 10,000 times. He could spot the smallest mistake, the tiniest hesitation, that meant a student was not fully focused. Today he saw something that pleased him. The morning practice was flawless. "Second form," he called out. Now the movements became faster, more complex. The students paired off, moving in patterns that looked like fighting but never quite made contact. They were learning to read each other's energy, to predict where an attack would come from before it was even launched. This was what separated true warriors from simple fighters. Anyone could learn to punch and kick, but only those who understood. The deeper mysteries could achieve real mastery. So-jin moved with her partner, a tall warrior from the ice worlds whose skin was pale blue. She could feel his intentions before he moved, could sense the way his energy gathered and flowed. When he feinted to the left, she was already countering to the right. When he gathered power for a strike, she was already dispersing her own energy to absorb the impact that would never come. The exercise continued for an hour. By the end, some of the younger students were breathing hard, but the advanced ones like So-jin and Tai-min looked as fresh as when they had started. This was another mark of true skill, the ability to use energy efficiently, never wasting a single motion or breath. "Rest," Hyun-woo said, and the students settled into meditation poses. The master walked among them, observing their breathing, checking their posture. These small details mattered. A warrior who could not find perfect stillness would never achieve perfect motion. The two were connected, part of the same greater truth that the academy had been teaching for 8 centuries. After the rest period, the students moved to weapons practice. The academy taught 17 different fighting styles, one for each species in the Galactic Alliance. But all of them were based on the same core principles: patience, precision, and the cultivation of inner power. Hyun-woo demonstrated a technique with the energy blade, a weapon that existed more as focused thought than as physical matter. In his hands it glowed with a steady blue light, perfectly stable and controlled. He moved through a complex pattern, the blade leaving trails of light in the air. Each cut was exactly where it needed to be, each thrust perfectly timed. Blade is not separate from the warrior, he told his students. It is an extension of your will shaped by your energy. Master yourself and you master the weapon. So Jin tried the technique, her blade flickering slightly as she moved. It was difficult to maintain the perfect mental state required while also executing the physical movements. But she had been practicing this for 15 years and gradually the blade steadied. Her movements became smoother, more confident. Taemin's blade was rock solid from the first moment. His family's generations of training showed in every gesture. But Hyun-woo noticed something else, a slight stiffness in his movements, a tendency to rely too much on what he had been taught and not enough on what he felt in the moment. It was a common problem among students from old warrior families. They knew the techniques so well that they sometimes forgot to truly feel them. The morning session ended with group meditation. 200 students sat in perfect silence, their breathing synchronized, their minds focused on the same ancient mantras. This was how every day began at the academy, and how it had begun for 800 years. As the students dispersed for their midday meal, Hyun-woo remained on the platform. He was thinking about the message that had arrived the night before. It came from the Galactic Combat Council, the organization that oversaw all martial training across the known worlds. The message was about the Centennial Trials, the great tournament that happened every 100 years. Warriors from every world would compete, demonstrating the highest levels of skill their species had achieved. It was more than just a competition. It was a celebration of everything the galaxy's fighters had learned and accomplished. This year, there was something new. Earth, the newest member of the galactic community, had requested to send representatives. Hyun-woo had heard of Earth, of course. It was a small world on the outer rim, populated by a species called humans. They had only made contact 50 years ago, which in galactic terms was practically yesterday. The Academy's council had discussed the request that morning. Most of the masters had been amused by the idea. How could a species that had just learned about the existence of other worlds possibly compete against warriors who had trained their entire lives in arts that were older than human civilization? Master Weltar, who taught the crystal being fighting style, had laughed openly. They probably still use primitive weapons, he had said. Metal swords and chemical explosives. How quaint. Master Zik-Ren, whose people could naturally manipulate electromagnetic fields, had been more diplomatic. We should welcome them, she had said. Everyone deserves a chance to learn. Perhaps watching our techniques will inspire them to begin their own journey toward true understanding. Hyun-woo had remained quiet during the discussion. Something about the human request intrigued him. In all his years of study, he had learned that every species brought something unique to the art of combat. The Ice Worlders brought endurance and patience. The Gravity Dwellers brought strength and resilience. The Crystal Beings brought precision and clarity of thought. What would the humans bring? He looked out across the training grounds, imagining what it would be like to see these unknown warriors attempt the trials. They would probably be eliminated in the first round, but perhaps they would learn something valuable from the experience. And perhaps the galaxy's established warriors might learn something too. The afternoon training session was about to begin. Students were returning to the platform, preparing for advanced techniques that would challenge even the most skilled among them. Hyun-woo pushed thoughts of the humans aside and focused on his duties as a teacher. But in the back of his mind, a small seed of curiosity had been planted.